What's being called the Scarlet Letter of the cyber age. New websites detailing the misdeeds of ex-cons released on parole. And they're turning up in unexpected places, like this Florida Department of Corrections registry we found linked to the tourism site myflorida.com. Well, remember, these aren't sex offenders, so should they keep paying for their crimes after they've served their time? With me, ex-con Tony Papa, who served 12 years on a cocaine conviction. His autobiography, 15 Years to Life, hits the shelves next year. Also founder of the Guardian Angels, Curtis Sliwa, and Lawrence Goldman, president of the National Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys. Tony, I've got to start with you. We can look you up, find you on the New York Department of Corrections website. What do you think about that?
I think it's outrageous because I spent 12 years. I was sentenced to 15 years to life for a nonviolent offense. I was granted clemency in 1997 by Governor George Pataki. I came out, served 12 years, was 5 years on parole, just got off. If you look at the website now, you still can see my information on that site. I feel I had paid my debt to society, 17 years, for a nonviolent crime, and I think it's about time. I think what has happened is society is in this strictly punitive mode of justice, the types of justice that sleeps in the shadows of life itself, a lock them up, throw away kind of mentality, that forgets that these individuals that come out have to integrate into society.
Let me ask you something. One of the arguments is certainly that if we continue to pressure and continue to punish, these guys are never going to break. They can't really go out and start over again. People can always look up and find out who they are. But the recidivism rate in this country, those who go back into prisons, that rate has been pretty consistent long before these websites appeared. So obviously having your name up there has not really affected those who fail and end up going back to prison.
Well, maybe not now, but maybe in the future, because if you look at these websites, the categories of crimes that do exist, they're continually expanding. You could smoke a marijuana cigarette and all of a sudden you'd be posted on a website. So I think the progression of the use of the internet against ex-cons, people coming out trying to reintegrate into society. I was 5 years on parole. I know how hard it is for people to get jobs, to get their lives together. There's many people who make mistakes in their life, and they're ready to re-enter society and become productive citizens.
Let me ask you though about people who might use the website. You're supposed to report to your employer on many applications that you're an ex-con or an ex-felon or whatever. So people who might be likely to use those websites are supposed to get this information anyway.
Well, I know for a fact. I work for a law firm, intellectual property law firm, Fish and Even, in New York City. When I signed my application, I told them who I was.
Sure.
So, and they accepted me. But at some level, maybe you don't want to tell people who you are. And all of a sudden, you get this job, and you go to the copy machine, and you see your information posted over the Xerox machine.
Curtis, you think that's fair?
Well, I think that's public information. And you see, that's part of the deterrent effect, because if a person is committed a crime, then obviously that's something you carry with you. You can't just sort of like just undo that. What you have to do then by your own actions is show that you're not capable of doing this again. But the general public who paid for the time that you were incarcerated, 3 hots, a cot, your basic, you were a ward of the state, they have a right to know what your background is, particularly since that wasn't a private part of your life. I don't have any problem in posting that information at all.
The problem is not just knowing a private part of the life, but what would happen with it. If in fact the punishment is supposed to be the time he did and the parole that he followed up with, the worry is that this is an ongoing punishment above and beyond what the state exacted.
Well, I deal in streets where guys come out of jail and they're right on the corner. They're bragging about the hard time that they did as if it was a badge of courage, stripes to all the little ones around. So I think we can't have it both ways. I think if you commit the crime and you do the time, and there is a public record of it, I don't have a problem with it being posted. I know it's going to make it more difficult, but it's also going to make it more difficult for you to integrate in and possibly con us, particularly if you're very good at running what I call the nines, or running a line, or sort of like running the rope-a-dope on society.
Yeah, well, Lawrence, that might apply to a certain segment, and if we're looking at about a 2/3% recidivism, maybe it applies to too many, but is that fair? Because the presumption is that you are an ongoing threat, to some would say, by putting this website out there.
Let me give you my view of this, and I agree with Vinny 100%. We want people to lead better lives. We want them to reintegrate in society. We don't want them to walk around with a scarlet letter on them saying, I am an ex-con. Somebody may choose to tell his friends, other people choose not to. With respect to instances where we need to know, or society thinks we need to know, i.e. should someone be a school teacher, should someone be work at the airport in a sensitive job, or any job, that we know. We have means of finding that out. There's no necessity whatsoever, other than our own prurient interest, to know if our next door neighbor...
but if they're already public records anyway, all you're doing is making it easier to access.
We are giving everyone access, and we're making it known. Someone can find out theoretically if they go to great depths. Now, when they got nothing to do at night, you flip on instead of saying...
But once again, if I can use a few inside phone calls and get the information, why should I be privy to that and not anyone who wants to get on the internet and find the answer?
Because it is one thing to say if you investigate and you find out some gossip about someone, or whether someone has AIDS. If you want to find out, if you have an interest, you find it out. We don't want, it's public records, or at least the public pays for someone to be on welfare.
Yeah.
We want to list the people on welfare. The public pays for someone to get medical treatment in the city hospital. We wanted this. Who's gotten treatment for dread disease?
Actually, you and I both know that that's much more acquirable than we'd like to think. Curtis, what would you do if you found out that your next door neighbor was a convicted murderer?
Oh, man, I think I'd be ready to sell the house. I mean, I'd want to put extra bars on the windows, locks on the doors. And
even though he or she had done their time?
I'd want to tell everyone in the neighborhood, give them a heads up. The next door is some guy who committed a murder. Because I don't want to all of a sudden become the second mistake or the third mistake. Now, if he minds his P's and Q's and I decide, well, he looks like he's been copacetic, all right, I want to take the chance, that's fine. But I should be given the opportunity. Just like I should know if there's toxic waste in the ground, if there's pollution in the air, there's radon gas, there's 10,000 warnings, deer crossing this. But I'm not supposed to know if a guy did time for murdering somebody next door.
One second. But what if you go alarm all the neighbors, you tell them what's happening, and some neighbor comes over and blows him away because he's
that neighbor is going to end up getting incarcerated themselves. And you know, in all the Megan's Law cases where there's been notification, how many barn burnings have there been? How many witch hunts have there been? How many people actually have been harassed into the grave? Have there been a few? 1, 2, you can count them on one hand.
You read some stories about some guy who can no more live in a neighborhood because they're literally sort of tacking signs out front, you know, sexual predator lives here, this kind of thing. Tony, last word?
Well, listen, I'm for public safety, but Curtis' view, he promotes vigilantism, and I think it's wrong.
Have you ever been threatened?
No, not really. But, you know, I'd rather have my own website. You can actually see my website, 15yearstolife.com. The information I post on my website, it'll help people learn about prison. Prison is not an easy experience. I went through hell in prison. I served 12 years in prison, 5 out on parole. I came out, reintegrated into society. I'm a tax-paying citizen, a productive citizen.
But Tony, I'll bet you when you were in jail, you wanted to know what the guy next door to you did because you had to live side by side with him. If you knew he was a murderer,
I didn't want to know.
Yeah, but Tony, if you knew he was a murderer, you'd be watching your back double time.
I didn't want to know because I couldn't sleep at night.
Don't tell me, don't tell me. But finally, isn't it a bit ironic that Tony's got a website that tells you all about his background? All right, Lawrence Goldman, Anthony Papa, and Curtis Sliwa. Gentlemen, thanks very much. Coming up next, a pastor is found dead